Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome to another question time. I feel like today is the perfect day, Sano, to just sit in bed and watch question time.
Yeah, we have been watching the rain outside the window a little bit. I love those days. I love those days for not leaving home.
So hopefully you're just chilling out and question time is just a nice added watch thing for you today.
Yep.
Now we've got a couple of questions. We don't have many questions today, but we have something that we want to discuss at the end of our question time.
Sure.
But we've got two questions from Duncan.
Yeah, good on you, Duncan.
Yeah, we are very thankful for your questions, Duncan. So we'll get into his first one, which is one from the Bible. It is from Proverbs chapter 11, verse 31. So I'll read it out. If the righteous receive their due on earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner?
Yep.
What does this mean, Sano? Can you help us unpack this a little bit?
Generally speaking, Proverbs has a really positive view of life and wisdom. And really all it's saying is the same thing it's been saying through this chapter, that people will get their comeuppance, people will get what they deserve. So he who brings trouble on his family will inherit only wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise. That is, in the natural course of things, wisdom pays off and good pays off, folly and evil don't pay off. And so that's what it's saying. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise. If the righteous receive their due on earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? In the nation of Israel, who are God's people under God's blessing in God's land, the righteous are the ones who will prosper, because they're the ones who do the will of God, and they will prosper in the land. And so it's Proverbs' very positive view of living wisely in the fear of the Lord. And so I guess in a sense you'd say that's balanced by Ecclesiastes' more cynical kind of view, or more we would call it more pragmatic, realistic kind of view. Proverbs is trying to lay out, generally speaking, how do you live a wise life, and what are the fruits of the wise life. And so they both speak truly, I think, into our experience in our world, but they're speaking different perspectives.
So it's more about the wisdom side of it, because in Ecclesiastes it is talking about, the meaningless that he sees is that the righteous men get what the wicked deserve and the wicked men get what the righteous deserve. And so in some ways it seems like it's contrasting and different.
Yeah, they are contrasting, but they're both wise visions of life. They're both understanding what happens in life. And so you'd almost say Proverbs accounts for generalities of the way that we live and the way things happen, and we generally see that this is the way the world works. Ecclesiastes accounts for the fact that the world doesn't always work that way, and also it ends in frustration and death, which we'll get to next week, I think, on the show.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that final observation of the teacher in Ecclesiastes. And so they would say one's a counterpoint to the other. They're both wise perspectives.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that clears it up for anyone else who is thinking that. Second question from Duncan. I feel like he didn't mean it necessarily for a question time, but Seno, you love to answer these.
I love to answer the naughty questions.
Seno, he asked, do you think that the Democrats are cheating?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Duncan. For those of you who aren't aware of what's going on, the US is having a presidential election as we speak. So the big day was yesterday and the day before, and the results are still spilling out and will spill out probably for weeks to come. So it's very close, and it's desperate. And are the Democrats cheating? Well, I think the reality is probably lots of different people are cheating in different ways. Certainly there have been accusations of manipulation, that sort of thing, but I think you've got to be careful in how you think about these things. And as Christians, I guess we have an advantage in that we can step back and say, these things are in the hands of God, and whatever happens in the outcome will be in God's hands. And I think you've just got to be a little bit careful about, I guess, being what we call a sore loser. Often this so much that happens in politics that the side who loses blames the voters or blames the cheats and says if only. And I think you just want to be a bit careful about coming across as a sore loser of things. I think that it is actually useful to be interested in the election. We live in the world that America has built largely, and we live in the orbit of America. And so what happens for them is actually significant for us. And so a change of the presidency means a change of policy, and that creates a bit of kind of, I guess, uncertainty about where our world and our culture is going as well. And I think there are bigger issues because we're Westerners, because we all live in the West, we live in the internet age. Things that are happening in America are very similar to things that are happening here. So the same media corporations that are operating in America represent the mainstream media in Australia. And one of the big issues that's going on at the moment is the media telling the truth, or are they being very partisan and for one side or the other? And I think that that's certainly true. And so that's teaching us to be a little bit more, I guess, cynical in our view of the media. We've got to be careful of what we read in the papers, what we see online, what we're getting from TV news, because by and large they're now picking sides, and so we just need to be aware of that. And they won't tell us. So if they were being good media, they would tell us, I'm on this side, and then we'll be able to understand their bias when they present things. But often what they're doing is they're not saying it. They're pretending to be unbiased, but they're giving us one side of the story, one way or the other. And so that's part of a lesson of our age in modern politics. And if we're seeing that in the States, we'll definitely see that in Australia as well. And that goes for, by the way, social media companies like Twitter, Facebook, those sort of places. They are buying into one side of the story and they are suppressing the other side. And you just got to be aware of that. You've got to be aware of what's going on with those media. And so I think there's a great advantage in that, actually. There's a great advantage for us in being aware. One of the positives of being a cynical 21st century internet savvy person is you're aware that people don't always tell you the truth. And so you actually are looking for what's true and genuine. And I that's what I would say. So I'd say listen to both sides of the media. Listen to what both sides are saying, because you might be able to discern a clearer picture. But also look for alternative sources of media. Look for sources of news that are that present facts a bit more objectively and are clear about what their bias is. I think there's a great good in people who are honest about what side they're on, and often you get a better read of things from those people. Anyway, so be careful of being a sore loser.
Very wise, very helpful for us, especially as there's so much media going on, and that we read these things, and especially us here in Australia who are following this. We're not actually in the country, so it's very interesting to be very separated from it, and yet have all this media telling us what's going on. How do we actually trust that? Good advice. So that wraps us up in terms of those kind of questions for today. But we did have a question, Sano, come in from the audience anonymously about why are there so many denominations of Christianity and how do they come about? And we thought this is a really good question. This is a question that is actually worth spending time on and dedicating a whole question time segment to. And so that's what we want to do. But we want to bring it up with you guys because we want to know, well, what questions do you have about this question? Denominations are a bit of a tricky thing.
They are.
Amongst Christians. It can start a lot of divisions.
So it's like, what are you?
Yeah.
No
comment. No comment because you might judge me.
So we've just talked about putting your bias out there front and centre, Caitlin.
I'll chat about it another time. But we want to have this conversation because the divisions sometimes are unhelpful. And we want to give wisdom as to what actually is the go with denomination.
Okay, that's now going to become an issue for the rest of the conversation. Perhaps we'll end it quickly to spare Caitlin.
About denominations. So we need to actually take this time.
And there are, like, I don't know, I've got loads of questions about it. One really simple one is, one of the whole things about being Christian is unity, that idea of being unified. So why are there so many differences if we're meant to be unified? Isn't that bad? So are denominations bad just because there are denominations and there's not just one church? That's something that a question that I've asked. Well,
and is it that are some good and some bad? Are some right?
Well, that's
and so you need to be.
Are some right and some wrong? Are some good? Are some bad? So there's preference issues. There's wisdom issues. There's right and wrong. There's true and false issues, and all those sort of mix of things.
Also, it means, therefore, how do you choose a denomination? How do you actually say, well, I'm going to go here, or...
And can the story of the denomination change, right? Can it start for one reason but go on for a different reason? And can it become something it wasn't? Because that's certainly true. Yeah.
And I think a big question is, perhaps for unbelievers, is what does it actually say about the Christian faith then?
If
you can't agree, then
why should you ask us?
Why
should I ask us to agree with you if you can't agree? So what does it mean that we disagree? What things do we agree on? And
and so it actually impacts us in our everyday choices. In some ways. Because you think about, who do you associate with? Are they of a different denomination, and what does that mean?
I imagine there's a whole lot of people who aren't Christians out there who just kind of just laugh at Christians because, come on. It's like the Premier League. There's just so many different footy teams to support, and is the fact that we support, is it a bit like footy? Is it a bit like, well, we all support different teams and we're passionate about different teams, but we're all for football. You know what I mean? It's all playing football. But we support different teams, but it's football. And so yes, there's things we argue about. Is Man U better than Man City? But we're all still playing football.
And there's also that thing of, well, a lot of us, perhaps in a certain generation, have grown up in a church through our family. And so when you ask them, oh, okay, well, what church have you come from? There's an identifier for a lot of people that they don't understand. I went to a Catholic church, or I grew up in an Anglican church. And there's an identifier there, but there's a lack of understanding as to what is that identifier.
Often we don't know what that means. I just know that's where I came from.
And so I guess, one question before we really start this in our next question time segment, or when we do it, why should we tackle this question? Why?
Well, okay, I think partly because people are going to ask us about it, right? So I would imagine at some point someone's going to ask you what's going on with all those different things, and so just in terms of having some awareness of that, that will be useful. I think as well, understanding your story, your history. So partly the story of denominations is the story of the history of the church. This has been going on for 2,000 years now and counting. And understanding this is understanding our story. It's like understanding your family story. You understand that, you understand a little bit more about where you came from and why, and so that can be important. And so, probably those are two big reasons for people. And perhaps there's also a wisdom thing, like, is there a church I should avoid or I should go to? Because I definitely think there are groups that would claim to be denominations of Christianity but aren't. And so that's one of the real dividing lines. One of the first dividing lines is this a Christian church or is it not? And so are there places to avoid? Would be one really big question. So there's probably a few different reasons I think why we should think about it. Because you wouldn't want to lob in a place and go. You kind of want some idea of where you could or should go.
And so that's why we want to deal with it. And so what we would like from you guys watching right now, or later on, whenever you're watching this, is to send us your questions about this question. What questions do you have about denominations? What do you struggle to understand? What would you actually like us to unpack? We want you guys to shape our conversation. We want to give the information that you guys want to know. That's the whole point of Question Time, is answering the questions that you have asked. So please leave a comment, message us directly, whatever it is, let us know what you would like to know about this topic. We'll dive into it in a little bit once we get all the questions.
Brilliant.
But until then, we hope you enjoy Question Time usually, and we will see you next time that we gather.
See ya.